Welcome, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Meanwhile, I am also sharing the YouTube link, and all those who are unable to join through Zoom, they can watch it on the YouTube also. And there is no limit on joining the YouTube. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Today is the last session of our online workshop on good clinical practice. Up till now, we already shared video link as well as PPT to all our participants of previous sessions. Now, today we are having two sessions. Before the start of the session, I request our President of NPT, Dr. R.K. Dikshit sir, to address the gathering for concluding session. Over to Dr. R.K. Dikshit sir.
Thank you, Professor Dakle. A very good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure and satisfying to see and witness the enthusiasm amongst the participants as well as the extra talented resource faculty. Organizers of this online GCP workshop deserve a huge congratulation and lots of appreciation for their efforts, planning, and ultimate execution with the perfection. Everyone contributed and fulfilled their roles. The team led by Professor Ganesh Dhakle, Dr. Professor Nitya Godke, and other faculty under the guidance and mentorship of Professor Padmaja Uday Kumar and Professor C.M. Kamal, our national coordinator. They have actually, they deserve a lot appreciation. During all these sessions, everybody learned relevant guidelines, relevant technicalities, and ethical issues while implementing the GCP at any place during the research work. I am sure that residents and faculty members must have been benefited as a GCP training, because this is one of the mandatory requirements for any clinical research, as well as your MD and MS degree. In the capacity of the President of National Association of Pharmacology and Therapeutics, I congratulate you all for successfully completing this much-needed online GCP workshop at the most appropriate timing. I wish the association will plan many more such academic feasts, online as well as offline, in near future. In this connection, it's my privilege to invite you all on the third National Conference of NPT to be held at AIIMS Nagpur on November 21st to November 23rd under the able leadership of our dynamic, efficient, dedicated, devoted General Secretary, Professor Ganesh Dakle. And I am sure that he has every plan to welcome you all in a positive way. And you will get positive vibes there. The association needs to show our solidarity strength for the positive impact of the pharmacology for the therapeutics at large. Professor C.M. Kamal, National Coordinator, Professor Padmaja Uday Kumar, immediate past president, are the source of constant inspiration and encouragement for the society, for the association. And last, I again thank you all for showing your interest towards the association as well as the online sessions which we conduct on a regular basis. So have a happy life, happy living, and happy learning. Jai Hind. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words for the workshop as well as conference. Now I request ex-president of NPT, Honorable Dr. Padmaja Uday Kumar, Madam, to release the logo as well as brochure of the NAPTICON 2024, which is going to be held at AIIMS Nagpur. Over to Dr. Padmaja Uday Kumar, Madam.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to perform a very pleasant task. It's a very happy moment for me. First, we will see the logo of NAPTICON 2024. Yes, that's so beautiful, isn't it? And then we will also see the brochure, the most awaited brochure for NAPTICON 2024. So here you can already see the meticulous work of Dr. Ganesh Dakle and his team. And as we go through the brochure, you can see the beautiful infrastructure of aims, the warm messages by the organizing secretary, the dynamic organizing secretary, and the aims director. And then here we have the team. We will be meeting each one of them when we go to Nagpur. I'm sure they are already working very hard to reach this level, and only when you reach there, you will know how interesting the program would be and how much of hard work they have done. So we have the National Governing Council of NPT. You know all of them. Yes, you know all of us. And then we have the executive body, the executive council, and then, yes, so the program details, the pre-conference workshops, 2 of them very interesting ones. And then we have the paper and poster presentation, and the young pharmacologists speak. I'm sure most youngsters here, the young pharmacologists, would be waiting to get an opportunity to speak in the conference. And then we have the NAPTI quiz for the postgraduates. Postgraduates, please start preparing as early as possible. And then we have panel discussion and the awards. We have a range of them, so many awards. I'm sure you are all aware of that. And please apply wherever you are eligible, for whatever award you are eligible for. Yes, and more details about the workshop. I was telling you, it's both are interesting topics. One on AI, that is the most sought after topic now. The other one also related to that. So I would request all the senior pharmacologists here to encourage your postgraduates and juniors, and maybe we also should register for the workshops. And then we have the plenary sessions, and then other programs, and the research awards, and in various categories. So please go through the categories and start making your papers and applying for the awards. And then we have the most awaited program of the conference, the Lifetime Achievement Award. The surprise will be broken in the conference. Yes, and I'm sure all of you would be having in mind what are the worth seeing places near Nagpur or in and around Nagpur. We have so many tourist attractions there, and we can't wait to reach there. And Dr. Dakale and his team would be waiting to welcome everyone there. And I'm sure we'll all have a great time. So all of you, please start registering at your earliest. Yes, thank you all.
Thank you, madam, for releasing logo as well as brochure of the conference. As organizing secretary of the conference, I request all pharmacologists to register for the workshop. Now going ahead, today's first topic is on 7 features of NDCT 2019, which will be taken by Dr. Savita Verma, madam. And the second session is on ACE and compensation guidelines, which will be taken by Dr. Meera Desai, madam. The first session will be moderated by Dr. Ashok Shinoy, sir. Sir is presently working as Professor Pharmacology, KMC Bangalore, which is a unit of MAHE Manipal. Sir is also member of Ethics Committee at KMC Bangalore, along with chairperson and member of various ethics committees, Manipal as well as Bangalore. Sir is also a member of FARSI as well as ACCRI and Indian Society for Clinical Research, Mumbai. Sir is having publication of more than 60 in national as well as international reputed journals, and Sir has received Good Teacher Award 4 times from KMC Bangalore. Sir is having 24 years of experience in clinical research, in which In 80 global clinical trials, he has participated as co-PI, and as a PI, he has participated in 15 bioequivalence studies. He is also trainer for ICH as well as Indian GCP guidelines in clinical research. So I welcome you, sir, for the session. The second session will be moderated by Dr. Balkrishnan, sir. Balkrishnan, sir, is presently working as Dean Student Welfare at AIIMS Bhopal. Sir is also professor and head of pharmacology there also. And sir is a GCP trainer. Sir is having more than 110 publications in national as well as international reputed journal. I also welcome Dr. Balkrishnan, sir, for the session. Now I request Dr. Ashok Shinoy, sir, to introduce first speaker, Dr. Savita Verma, madam. First session will be for 25 minutes, followed by question and answer session for 5 minutes. Over to Dr. Ashok Shinoy, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Dakle, sir. It is my privilege to introduce Dr. Savita Verma. New drugs and clinical trial rules, which has superseded the Schedule Y of the Drugs and Cosmetic Act, is an important document if you are doing a sponsored clinical trial. And who is there? None other than Dr. Savita Verma to give a glimpse of the New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. Madam is the Deputy Dean and the Professor of Pharmacology in Pandit B.D. Sharma Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, Rohtak, Haryana. Her areas of interest are clinical research, pharmacovigilance, bioethics, and medical education. She has n number of achievements, out of which the notable ones are COVID-19 Warrior Award, Women's Achiever Award, Ayushman India 2020 Award, Best Teacher of the Year 2022 Award, State President's Award, Plaque of Appreciation by Indo-Arab Helping Hands. Madam has got 30 international publications and 48 national indexed publications. Madam, we are eager to listen to you, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashok, for the lucid introduction. And I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. I'll try to do justice with the topic. And yes, it is an important topic which has been given to me, New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules, which are popularly known as NDCT rules. Just a second. Just a second, sir. Actually, वो बार मिस हो रहा है full screen के लिए. Yes, sir. I hope my screen is visible now.
Yes, madam, it is visible.
So the topic given to me is
Yes, ma'am.
The topic given to me is salient features of NDCT rules, which are popularly known as New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules. And yes, these have been a very important and much awaited landmark decision or landmark introduction for the clinical research in India. So the agenda for today is just to understand what is the effect of these rules on institutions and people who are going to conduct clinical research, some of the salient features and how to stay compliant with them, and what are some of the recent recent amendments in these rules. So first of all, I just want to give a brief overview of how these rules came into being. So there were many irregularities in the medical research which were observed before 2013. And one of the important landmarks out of them was death in trials in HPV vaccine. And it was observed that tribal girls from poor areas who were malnourished were consented for participation in the study. And what was observed was that all the consent forms were in English, and let alone the participants, even the researchers who were introducing these consent forms were not well versed with English. So this raised a big alarm in the research in India and as well as in the whole world also, because many irregularities in this HPV vaccine trial were observed throughout the world. And second important landmark was in infertility drug trial rules, which were flaunted with letrozole. And only 3 doctors performed these and approval was given And they performed these trials only on 55 participants when at least 100 participants were mandated by the regulatory body. So because of these lapses, the Parliamentary Standing Committee took a decision that a total of 31 new drugs, which were approved between January 2008 to 2010, they were conducted without clinical trials. So a lot of hue and cry happened because of this. And on 2013, October 21, Supreme Court of India ordered that there should be a revision and clear-cut guidelines should be made, taking into consideration the efficacy as well as risk versus benefit and unmet need in the country. And because of these lapses, these rules were framed, and it took almost 6 years for these rules to be framed so that the regulations in India can be effective, transparent, and predictable. And these rules superseded the existing rules, which is Part XA and Schedule Y. And these are amendments to Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1945. And the new rule has been inserted, namely the NDCT rules 122 DAA. So what is the importance of these rules was that these rules have been very clearly laid down. Yes, there are some ambiguities still, but which are being cleared in the amendments. But what has happened is that because of these rules, let's see what happened later on. We saw some changes in the regulatory landscape. There was promotion of clinical research in India, and these mainly cater to approval of clinical trials and new drugs. But for the first time, the academic research was also brought under the ambit of rules. And we saw applications of these rules during the COVID time, when the first drug was approved by FDA for the use of COVID-19, simultaneously, because there were clear-cut guidelines laid down for the unmet need in the country in these rules, we could see that emerging drug authorization was provided in India as well for some of the drugs which were used for COVID. And nobody can, undermine the importance of approval of COVID vaccines, which happened in India. And because of these vaccine approvals, many millions and millions deaths were saved throughout the world. So 2 important applications which happened, luckily, immediately after these rules came into being, and thanks to COVID pandemic. And some of the salient features these rules are catering to are these. I'll be discussing in brief about some of them. And some of them have already been covered in different sessions. And compensation for injuries will be covered by Dr. Meera after my session. So let's delve into them. These rules have 13 chapters containing 107 rules of 264 pages, and they have 8 schedules with very important 27 forms. These are 13 chapters and 70 rules. I'll briefly touch some important one of them. And the first one is chapter 1, which is preliminary chapters. And I think this is the most important chapter for everyone because it is clearly defining various terms, and it pertains to who are applicable. These rules are applicable to. These rules are applicable to all the new drugs, any research which is going to be conducted on new drugs, BA/BE studies. All the ethics committees were also brought under the ambit of these rules. So all the ethics committees are also now governed by these rules. That's why ethics committees throughout the world have become more strict, as well as the clinical trials. So coming on to the important definitions, what do you understand by the term new drug? A new drug is a chemical entity which has not been used in the country, is being used for modified or new claims for indication, route of administration, dosage or dosage form. Some new FDCs which are being combined in a fixed dose ratio for the first time. Some modified or sustained release preparations, as well as biologics. And all these will be considered as a new drug for 4 years. And what is importance of biologics is that these are some of the drugs which are biologics, all the human-derived products, stem cell research, genetic research, vaccines, monoclonal antibodies, drugs derived from living modified organisms. So why biologics are important? That once they are approved in the country, they will be considered as new drug for 4 years. But if there is any modification in these products, then they will always be considered as a new drug. And they will always have to follow the criteria of new drugs. I'll differentiate it a little further once we discuss what do you understand by the clinical trials and academic trials. That what is the difference between the therapeutic products or the new drugs and biologicals. So please remember, biologicals will always be considered as a new drug. And whenever some academic research has to be planned for them, then permissions accordingly, ECs will have to see how to grant permissions for them. So, and what do you understand by the investigational new drug? Again, you will come across this term again and again. It is a new chemical entity or biological product which has not been approved for marketing as a drug in any country. An investigational product is the active pharmacological ingredient or the placebo which is being used for a clinical trial. They have clearly defined what orphan drugs means. An orphan drug is pertaining to a population which is orphan diseases, a population which is not affecting more than 5 lakh individuals, and a drug which is going to be used for these individuals. And yes, we do have different fast track criteria for giving approvals, regulatory approvals for orphan drugs. The important is they also defined what do you understand by the term biomedical and health research. So basic and applied or operational research to gain scientific knowledge about diseases, conditions, and whatever you are planning to do in a clinical research, but does not include clinical trial. So for the first time, they demarcated the difference between a clinical trial and an academic clinical trial. So a clinical trial is any systemic study on a new drug or an investigational new drug to generate data on clinical, pharmacological, or adverse effects with the objective to see safety, efficacy, and tolerability, but for any new drug which is to be introduced in a country. Whereas academic clinical trial is a drug can be done only for a drug which has already been approved by a regulatory authority and not on any new drug, number one. Number two, if there is any change in the biologicals, then again, you cannot do academic research on these drugs. For a new indication, new route or of administration or new dose, because many times we do see academic research being done on off-label use of drugs. And then very important is that the results are only intended to be used for academic purposes or for research purposes. That means that any company on the basis of these publications based on academic clinical trials cannot ask for regulatory approvals for marketing authorization or waiver of clinical trials. So what is the basic difference between the two is that clinical trials are done for commercial purposes on a new drug which has not yet been approved in the country. But academic trials can be done for therapeutic products as well as for biologicals, both. But those drugs should have been granted approval by the Central Licensing Authority. Then sometimes there is overlap between the two. So if there is an overlap between the two, then power has been given to the ethics committee that they should inform about that particular study to the DCGI within 13 working days of receiving that letter. Central Licensing Authority has to give a clarification within 30 days. And if the ethics committee do not receive any clarification from the Central Licensing Authority, then it is assumed that this trial or this study is being approved and the participant or the researcher can go ahead with that particular clinical study. So they are giving a guidance to the ethics committee. Then they have defined bioavailability studies to see the rate and extent of the drug absorption, bioequivalence studies to establish the absence of statistically significant differences. I'll discuss later what is the importance of these BAB studies and why they are being clearly defined over here. Then they have defined similar biologics as well, a product which is similar in terms of quality, safety, and efficacy. Then very important, another clause which was added was post-trial access. So if a trial is being done on the trial participants for a new drug, so many times what happens, the time is taken for market authorization or for manufacturing of that product. So if a participant is responding very well to that drug, after completion of the clinical trial, the drug is not available for that participant might be for a longer duration. So this has been made mandatory that the sponsor has to provide that new drug to the participants free of cost till the time that drug is marketed in the country. They have defined who a sponsor is, a company who will be responsible for overall management of a clinical trial. They have clearly defined the qualifications of principal investigator, primarily responsible for ensuring the conduct of a trial at a particular site. And in case there is a group of investigators, then he's the responsible team leader. And yes, what we are undergoing this training, that education qualifications are very important is the GCP training has been mandated and protocol specific trainings have to be maintained at the site. Then they have demarcated what is serious adverse event. I think this topic has already been covered or will be covered in the next session. So I'm not going to go into detail into this topic. Then in chapter 2, they have defined who will be the authorities and officers responsible for implementation of these studies. So we all are aware that our central licensing authority in India is Central Drugs and Standard Control Organization, and they have delegated their powers to Drug Controller General of India, DCGI, and this is the FDA Bhavan, which is located in Delhi, and this is their Sugam portal or e-portal. Now, all the applications, our central licensing authority is not accepting any application offline or in hard documentation. All the applications and forms are available online, and the process has been very streamlined. So this is the portal where the applications can be made. And then we have Chapter 3, Ethics Committees. I think this has been already covered, but I'll just quickly go through them. Constitution of Ethics Committee has been clearly defined. What is the minimum number of members required? What is the quorum of members should be there? Terms of reference have been where registration has to be done, and what is the validity for that committee. So ethics committees who are going to look into the clinical trials, BA/BE studies will have to be registered with CDSCO, and application for renewal has to be made in Form CT01 within 90 days, before 90 days of expiry. And then we have ethics committees for biomedical and health research. Now, these are constituted in accordance with the ICMR guidelines 2017. So what is important over here is that before the implementation of these rules, ICMR guidelines were just guidelines to be followed or not to be followed depending on the individuals. But after NDCT rules, these guidelines have been brought under the ambit of the rules. So now for academic research also, these guidelines are like rules or Bible of academic research in India. And their registration is under Rule 17, and their renewal of registration again has to be made after 90 days, and this registration is with DHR. So Chapter 5 is about conduct of clinical trials. What is clinical trials for new drugs, INDs, and where BA/BE studies are required. So in accordance, clinical trials of new drugs or IND has to be done in accordance with the permission which is granted by CDSCO. And time to time, EC periodically has to see the oversight. And now monitoring is mandatory by the ethics committees of these clinical trials. And this validity of permission of initiation of clinical trial has also been defined. And it is 2 years from the date of issue. And like I've already discussed, that post-trial access of new drugs has also been included and clearly demarcated in these studies. So permission for the conduct of clinical trial is given in Form CT06. Application has to be submitted in Form CT04, and no fee is required from the persons or from the institutions who are partially or wholly owned by the governments. The status report of the clinical trials has to be regularly updated on the Sugam portal once and every 6 monthly, as well as if there is termination of a clinical trial, then detailed reasons for termination has also been communicated. Then at any time, this has also been clearly demarcated that monitoring by the central assessing authorities and the inspection can be done at any time without giving any prior notice. And they have clearly laid down the criteria that when they are going to suspend or cancel the permission to conduct a clinical trial. And this is mentioned in Rule 22 and Rule 23. These are various actions which the regulatory authority can take. They can issue a warning, or they can suspend or cancel the permission. They can result the results of the clinical trial, or they can debar the site, sponsor, investigator for further conduct of the trials. And then they have laid down the guidelines for the foreign approved and marketed drugs, and took the advantage of these guidelines during the COVID pandemic. And at many places also, again, this advantage is being taken, that drugs which are specified by DCGI, so when can they be waived off, and the Indian market when can they get the permission for the marketing authorization? So the countries specified by the CDSCO in collaboration with the central ministry from the time to time, if there is an unmet need in India, life-threatening or serious diseases and orphan drugs. I think, have I exceeded my time limit?
No, madam, no. You can go ahead.
Okay, fine. So these are some of the conditions where waiver of local clinical trials can be granted, and they have been clearly laid down in the Indian guidelines. And if a global trial is ongoing, and India is also part of that global trial, but that drug is being approved in some other country, which is selected developed market, again authorized by the CLA, then that drug can be marketed India also, despite the fact that the trial in India is still ongoing. Then part B of this chapter has details about the BAB studies and oversight over the BAB studies, validity period, 1 year from the date of issue, and registration of the BAB centers. Then chapter 4 is about compensation. This part will be covered in the next session. Then we have chapter 7 about the BAB study center and their validity period, renewal period, and this very important. For the first time, these centers have been to be registered with the central licensing authorities, and periodic inspections of these centers are also mandatory. Then chapter 8, 9, and 10, I'm taking them simultaneously because they are about the manufacture of new drugs for study or for purposes or for examination, test, and analysis. Chapter 9 is again import of new drugs, and chapter 10 is about import and manufacture of new drugs for sale or for distribution in India. Chapter 11 is for import and manufacture of unapproved new drugs, but they have to be initiated by the government hospitals or government medical institutions. So for certain diseases or rare conditions where the drug cannot be undergo the regulatory processes in India, so a provision has also been made for them. And but permission has to be taken from CDSCO, and the product has to be maintained and labeled in the government institutions. Chapter 12 is about the amendments in the drugs and cosmetic rules. And this chapter clearly lays down that in case of any disparity between the earlier rules and this rule, the provisions of NDCT rules will apply. Then chapter 12 is about miscellaneous, but it is a very important chapter which has changed the landscape of the approval process in the CDSCO. And this pertains to pre-submission meeting. Now, pre-submission meeting is that to fast track the process of regulatory approvals in India. So a provision of pre-submission meeting has also been made wherein a sponsor or an investigator who wants to do a clinical research in India can take the guidance from the expert committees present in the CDSCO by submission of a fee. So what happens is that sometimes when they come up with the proposals, there are many lacunas in that proposals, and they have to come again with the revised documents many times. So this process becomes very lengthy and takes a lot of time. So a provision has been given for pre-submission meetings. A provision has also been given for post-submission meetings that in case the sponsor is not happy with the decision which has been given by the CDSCO, then within 15 days, they can, with the payment of some fees, they can ask for a post-submission meeting, and they can have a discussion that why they were not granted that approval for a clinical trial or market authorization. Then constitutional expert committees, we all are aware of subject expert committees in CDSCO now. And again, important thing is name of the countries for the purpose of new drug approval. This means that, like I discussed earlier, that for therapeutic products, if a product is marketed in certain countries, like in America, Canada, US, or ICH GCP signatory countries, so those lists are released by the Central Licensing Authority in collaboration with Government of India, Central Government of India. And those drugs, if they are approved by their regulatory agencies like FDA, EMA, or Health Canada, then those the companies can directly go in India for market authorization with the clause that they will have to perform phase 4 clinical trial. And the mode of payment of fee for various studies, clinical trials, and market authorization has also been clearly laid down. Then we have some schedules. These are again important schedules. I'll quickly go through them. First schedule is regarding the general principles. Second schedule is about regarding the guidelines and conduct of clinical trials. Then we have requirements for BAB studies, post-marketing assessment, fee payment, formulation of compensation, then how to make these applications for renewal of ethics committees. And another important thing which has happened is fast tracking of the approval processes. So the application approvals have to be done within 30 days for Indian drugs, and they are being done within 90 days for foreign drugs. And then in case, very important clause again, in case there is no communication from DCGI for an application approval, it is deemed to be approved, and then the companies can go ahead with the process. And some amendments, because there were some lacunas in these rules, so some amendments have also happened. Important one is then that registration of CROs has now been mandated. Then amendment in the first schedule regarding the stem cell research. We know that there is a lot of increase in the stem cell research. provision for inspections and insertion of deemed approvals in various rules, some changes in different rules, rules for stockpiling of new drugs, then amendments in the 8th schedule, that is the Form CT03. This is the one which is made for the application of clinical trials. Some rules changes in the laboratory techniques as well. And in the end, I'd like to acknowledge my residents, Dr. Rashi, Dr. Dipender, for helping me with this presentation. And thank you. I hope I didn't exceed my time.
Yes, madam. Yes. Ashok sir, you can go ahead. Ashok sir, are you there? Okay. Ashok sir, mute yourself. Unmute.
Ashok sir, unmute yourself. Unmute. Ashok sir, unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Now I can
Yeah,
I was
you
able
are
to
audible.
unmute. Yes, ma'am, yes. Madam, thank you so much. This is such a vast document. These rules are so much, and you have given a glimpse of these rules in 25 minutes along with the amendments. It is really nice, madam. And we will take 1 or 2 questions from the audience for the scarcity of time.
I saw some hands raised during the presentation.
Yeah.
Madam, just 1 or 2 questions. One
Yes.
question is,
Yeah.
does NDCT rule 2019 allow dual role of MS or a chairperson, member secretary or chairperson?
Dual role, yes, dual role is there. What is important, the chairperson has to be outside the institute. And yes, pharmacologists are member secretary over there. So basic scientist is there.
No,
And
the question
secondly, they
is,
are also the member secretary. So yes, dual role. In fact, they are promoting dual roles. Many of our members are social scientists as well, and they are layperson as well. NGO persons are there. So we are promoting dual rule over there. Yes, NDCT rule allows for it.
ICMR guideline 2017 is allowed dual role by MS as well as chairperson. But according to the NDCT rule, they don't allow. Whenever we send the list of members, they say that only one person can act as a one layperson or the chairperson, not as a both. So
No, that is because of the quorum. So when they give you the approval, they are defining the primary role of that participant. Okay,
Yes,
so but, you will have always have one chairperson, or sometimes when the chairperson grants, we have an active chairperson over there. But if a chairperson in a committee cannot act as a chairperson as well as a lay person, because
yes,
under the
correct.
quorum. So, but if it is outside the quorum, then I think it is allowed.
Yes, that is
primary
correct.
role has to be specified.
Yes. Second question is, does the NDCT have provision for compassionate use of drug? As mentioned by you, there is a role for post-trial access.
Post-trial access,
So is
yes.
there any compassionate use of drug?
Compensation, I discussed over there that if a trial participant is there, then post-trial access is mandatory. But otherwise, there is a provision with the government doctors and government hospitals, but not with the private practitioners. So on compassionate use also, I discussed in one of the chapters that we can import or we can use a drug if it is still not approved in India, but that can only be done by the government institutions and government doctors after due permissions from the CDSU.
Okay, madam. Thank you so much. Rest of the question you can go ahead in the chat box also.
Yes.
So thank you, Dr. Shinoy, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Now I request Dr. Balkrishnan, sir, to introduce second speaker, Dr. Meera Desai, madam, for the session. Again, this session will be for 25 minutes, followed by question answer session for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Meera Desai.
Yeah.
Professor Meera Desai is presently working.
Just a minute, sir. Just a minute.
Yeah.
A1 Logics, please note that popping off some sounds or the messages in the background. Please take care. Thank you.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Meera Desai is a professor of pharmacology at M.K. Shah Medical College, Ahmedabad. She is a chairperson and member of various committees, including the Signal Review Panel, Expert Data Review Committee. She has also been awarded a lot of awards by the PVPI for making a significant contribution to pharmacovigilance. She is the coordinator academics of Medical Education Unit, and she has been an outstanding student, unlike most of us in MBBS. She has received a lot of gold medals, including in pharmacology, medicine. She's got a substantial number of publications, 77, with 1,027 citations. Ma'am, it's my pleasure to welcome you to address the gathering. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the kind introduction. Let me just share my screen. Can you see the slide?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, it's in the slideshow mode.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, all ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be a part of this online workshop on good clinical practice. And I thank the organizers, Dr. Ganesh Dakle, Dr. Kamal sir, Dr. Dikshit sir, for giving this opportunity. And I'll be speaking on the serious adverse event reporting and the compensation guidelines. The outline of my presentation. The outline of my presentation includes the need and types of safety reports, the criteria for serious adverse event reports, the regulations for assay reporting, especially the data elements and the timelines, and the compensation guidelines for formula for the clinical trial research related injury and death. Now, before I start talking about the need and the types of safety report, let me share with you some of the common case scenarios which are observed in clinical research. So the first case is a 40-year-old patient with a chronic myeloid leukemia. He was enrolled in a clinical trial for bosutinib study drug, and that drug was to be taken daily. He was adherent to the treatment, and after 2 weeks, the patient reported with complaints of uneasiness, fatigue, loss of appetite. So the investigator advised for the lab investigation, and it was observed that the renal function, especially the serum urea and creatinine, they were abnormal. So the investigator hospitalized the patient for further investigation and reported the event to the sponsor and ethics committee. The second case is a 51-year-old patient with a dilated cardiomyopathy plus hypertension. He was enrolled in a study and the drug was ivabradine. After 3 months, the patient was diagnosed with P5X malaria with severe thrombocytopenia. The investigator started the treatment for malaria, but due to severe thrombocytopenia, he hospitalized the patient, and the investigator reported the event to the sponsor and ethics committee. The third case, a 44-year-old male participant, he was a healthy subject, was enrolled in a bioequivalent study of loperamide, and he was hospitalized. He was in the facility for 48 hours. He was discharged at the end of 48 hours, and everything was within normal limit. But he was asked to report after 1 week for the ambulatory blood samples. However, the next day, the subject met with a road traffic accident and reported to the facility. The PI referred to orthopedic surgeon for further treatment and reported the event to the ethics committee and the sponsor. So these are the extremely common cases we come across in clinical research, clinical trials. So what was the need for the PI to report the event to the ethics committee and the sponsor? Safety reporting is essentially a scientific, ethical, and regulatory requirement
to conduct clinical research as per ICH GCP guidelines and Indian GCP guidelines. Secondly, the safety reports, they have an impact on other participants in the study and all prospective recipient. The period of observation starts once the patient has signed the informed consent. Whether the dosing is done or not, that is besides the point. But once the informed consent has signed by the subject or the patient, the observation for safety starts. It continues throughout the study period, and even when the study is completed, 14 days after the study is completed, the subject is supposed to be observed for safety reports. Now, with this information, let's start talking about what are these safety reports. The first one is the adverse events. And a part of these adverse events are adverse drug reactions. So what are adverse events? Any untoward medical occurrence in a participant, which may be an abnormal symptom, a disease or a lab finding, which may or may not be related either to study drug or concomitant medication or clinical trial procedure. That is an adverse event. A part of these adverse events, which are related to the drug, and they are noxious, unintended, and there is a causal relationship is suspected, that becomes an adverse reaction. The difference between adverse event and adverse drug reaction, that there is no causal relationship in adverse event, but the adverse drug reaction, a causal role is suspected. The third type, an extreme type of adverse event, is a serious adverse event. So what really makes a serious adverse event? What are the criteria for serious adverse event? When an adverse event which requires a prolonged hospitalization, which results into death, is life-threatening, results into significant disability, and is a congenital anomaly. Any one of this criteria, if that is an adverse event, that particular adverse event will be categorized and labeled as a serious adverse event. And we have the regulations for this assay reporting and the compensation for research-related injury as per the Gazette notification of 2013. And recently, Savita Madam said, as per the NDCT rule of 2019. And these rules, they specify what should be reported, how it should be reported, especially the data elements, the timelines, who should be compensated, who is supposed to compensate, that compensation guidelines, the quantum of compensation, all these. Now, the compensation, when we talk about compensation, it is related to financial compensation. The participant is given the money, and that is a compensation for research-related injury and death. The principle of this compensation in India, in our Indian regulation, it is based on the philosophy of no fault compensation. When I say no fault compensation, what does it mean? The trial participant need not prove that there was some fault of the investigator, or there was fault of the sponsor, or there was some fault in the study drug or study design, and need not approach the court of law to seek compensation, unlike many countries in the world. There are so many countries in the world where the participant, if there is a research-related injury, if they have to pay for medical management as well as compensation, they literally have to go to the court of law, prove the fault of the researcher, sponsor, and that's how they seek the compensation. And this is something unique to our country. And this has made our regulations very efficient and predictable. And this has not only that, this has also increased the level of confidence among the stakeholders towards clinical trial. Now, who are the key players? Who are the stakeholders for reporting and assessment? Obviously, the investigator has a vital role to diagnose, to identify the adverse event, the serious adverse event. And the first and foremost responsibility of the investigator is to start the treatment without going into the causal relationship. And that is the fundamental scientific and ethical responsibility of the investigator as per the ICH GCP and Indian GCP guidelines. Once the treatment is started, the second important responsibility is to report the adverse event, which I have shown in my case scenarios, to report it to the ethics committee, sponsor, and the central licensing authority, that is CDSU. So investigator has a vital role in diagnosis, treatment, and reporting within first 24 hours. While the assessment of serious adverse event, it is specially not only of the investigator, but also the other stakeholders like sponsor, ethics committee, as well as there are some special SAE committee or the expert committee, they are also there at the central licensing authority. So the assessment is done by all these stakeholders. Now, you need to report it. So what is the procedure of reporting? You need to find out, you should have all essential data elements for reporting. And that includes the details of the patient to identify at which study center the essays took place, what was the randomization number, and all other details of the patient, the clinical trial identification, that is especially by the protocol number, the details of the study drug, the brand name, generic name, etc. More important, the SAE medical term. What was the SAE? That has to be included, and it is the investigator responsibility to diagnose it, whether it was acute pancreatitis, whether it was P. vivax malaria, whether it was an abnormal kidney functions, or whether it was a road traffic accident. That has to be specified in table Y, because that is a term which will be used throughout the reporting as well as assessment. And not only that, we also need to give the complete detail about the description of adverse event, the case narrative, because all other stakeholders, they are going to review, and their review assessment and their opinion will depend upon all the case narrative. And it has to be a very structured, like a, in a very logical sequence, what happened to the patient, on which day, and how it was treated. The details of all treatment received, the details of lab investigation, the details of causality assessment, whether it is related, not related, and obviously if it is related, on what ground it is related. If that explanation is also given, that really helps. What was the outcome, whether SAE resolved, or it is continuing, or it was a fatal SAE, it was a death, what action was taken, and whether the participant is eligible for any compensation or not. This has to be included, followed by the details of the investigator, the details of the sponsor, the date of reporting ethics committee. See, the ethics committee has a very vital role. Everywhere ethics committee information, opinion, review, analysis, because it has a very, the ethics committees in India, they are empowered to do that, and they have a vital role. And as per NDCT, now the form which is to be used for SAE reporting for regulatory trial is Table 5. Previously, in the Schedule Y, it was Appendix 11 that has been revised to Table 5. And the investigator has to clearly mention whether this report, is it an initial report, or it is a follow-up report, or a final report. Along with that, the investigator is supposed to attach all other medical documents, not only these medical documents, whether the study was approved by DCGI or not, whether the study was approved by ethics committee or all these approval letter, whether the patient, the informed consent of the patient, and if there is a death, if it is a fatal SAE and the post-mortem is done, even the post-mortem report should be attached to this key Table 5. And that will help the assessment by all other stakeholders. Now, the timelines. What should be reported and what is the whole flow, framework of reporting? As soon as the investigator comes to know about the serious adverse event which has happened to one of his participants, within 24 hours, he is supposed to report to the initial report, to the ethics committee, to the sponsor, as well as central licensing authority. Followed by 14 days due analysis, because we expect by 14 days, the investigator will have all essential investigations. He might even seek some expert opinion, depends upon the assay. So he will have all the reports. And by this time, 14 days, the initial assessment will be done. And the investigator is supposed to submit, either it can be a follow-up report if the assay is continuing. If the assay is already resolved by 14 days, it will be final report. And this 14 days report has to be submitted to ethics committee and the CDSU. Once the ethics committee receives the final report from the investigator, it is the responsibility of the ethics committee to review, to assess, and give its opinion on causality assessment and whether the patient is eligible for compensation or not. And the time frame for this, the ethics committee is given 30 days, and within 30 days time period, the ethics committee is supposed to submit it to the Central Licensing Authority, CDSU. Once the CDSU receives all these documents and the opinion of ethics committee, they submit it to their own expert, although it's a part of CDSU, but that is it has nothing to do. All the members are external. So these experts, subject experts, they examine the report, do the causality assessment, and recommend quantum, if at all the patient is eligible. What should be the quantum, that is decided by, final decision is of the expert committee at CDSU. And the time frame which is given is the 60 days. They are supposed to submit their opinion to the CDSU office. CDSU now, once receives the final report from this expert committee, within 90 days, they send the letter. It can be considered as a notification to the sponsor to pay the compensation, that within 30 days of receiving this letter, you are supposed to pay this much amount to either the patient and the nominee. So you can see that each and every stakeholder in this whole clinical research trial, they have a responsibility, and they are supposed to follow the timelines for their own responsibility. So what are the rules for assay reporting? All serious adverse event reports should be following and submitting their opinion within the stipulated timelines as per the regulatory guidelines. However, if it is an adverse event, it is not as per the category which I have already described, that what really makes serious. If it is adverse event and not a SAE, they are not supposed to follow these reporting guidelines. And that's why they do not fall under the clause of compensation. However, the ethics committee, all adverse event should be reported to ethics committee as clinical updates, progress report, and the trial reports until resolved. So again, we can say that ethics committee has a big responsibility, and they need to check what are the clinical updates and what really happened to the patient, whether it is the care is being given or not, and whether that particular adverse event is resolved or not. So that becomes the responsibility of ethics committee, even if it is an adverse event. Now, as per our regulation, we have the medical management as well as compensation for research-related injury. The participant will be provided free medical management. That means a free treatment as long as required till the PI says it is related, or till it is established that the injury is not related. Secondly, if the trial-related injury or it is a permanent disability, the sponsor is supposed to provide the financial compensation, as I already mentioned. Now, what are the rules for these? If I try to simplify what I said earlier, that what are the rules for the medical management and compensation in trial-related injury? An injury to clinical trial participant should be given free medical treatment as long as required. That is first thing. Secondly, an injury to a trial subject related to clinical trial and or investigational product should not only be given free medical management, but also financial compensation, because there is it is related. Thirdly, if there is a death of the subject, which is also related to clinical trial or investigational product, he should be given free medical management and financial compensation to the nominee. So this is very important, that who will be the nominee when the investigator is enrolling the patient in the trial at the time of informed consent process. You have to take the information about the who is the nominee, because you never know which patient will require. Finally, all expenses, whether it is a medical management, whether it is a financial compensation, it is borne by the sponsor. So now this is very important, that sponsor is responsible for all this. What are the criteria for financial compensation? This is also, let us go a little in detail, because these are the aspects which will be considered by each of the stakeholders. If there is an adverse event due to investigational product, concomitant medication, or clinical trial procedure. If I try to explain clinical trial procedure, I know many of the students are there. If there is an intracath, let's say, and that intracath is kept for maybe 24 hours, 48 hours, and the patient is discharged. And then after a week, the patient comes back with thrombophlebitis. So now this procedure was done because of the clinical trial, and that is why it is related, and that becomes a clinical. Or if the clinical trial requires endoscopy or catheterization, and the patient ends up with urinary tract infection, that means it is related to clinical trial. Secondly, violation of the protocol, scientific misconduct, or any negligence, failure of the study drug to provide the therapeutic benefit, not providing standard of care even though available, and injury to a child in utero because of the participation of parent in a clinical trial. So these are the criteria to give the financial compensation. Now, the moot question is, who will pay financial compensation? We know that it's sponsor. So the sponsor who is conducting the trial, he's supposed to give an undertaking to provide compensation in case of clinical trial related injury or death for which the subjects are entitled. And this he's supposed to give when he gives all the application to the IEC member secretary that we want your services, we want your IEC to review our documents. So it is a responsibility of the ethics committee to check whether this undertaking by the sponsor is given or not. If not, don't accept the application until this. For regulatory trials, who are the sponsor? We know that regulatory trial, Savita madam has already explained, when the data is used for marketing or commercial purpose, that is simplified, is a regulatory trial. And obviously the pharmaceutical industry or anyone who has taken the permission from CDSCO, they become the sponsor and they are supposed to provide. Now, the question is whether the same regulations are also applicable to our academic studies. Most of us working in medical colleges, teaching hospitals, undertaking postgraduate thesis, investigator trial, DNB students, and MD students. So whether the same regulations are applicable? If I just try to simplify the answer, yes, it is also applicable. The only difference is the sponsor is different. Who becomes a sponsor? An investigator-initiated trial or a student research, whether it is an MD dissertation, PhD thesis, your ICMR student short-term project, the teacher, the investigator, or the institution head, they become the sponsor. And secondly, the institute should provide the free medical management for research-related injury, should also have the budgetary provision for medical management of adverse event and SAE, and the institute should also have a corpus fund and the insurance for compensation. Unfortunately, I'm very much sure that most of our medical colleges and the hospitals, they do not have. And that is why we cannot do any study, especially which is an interventional. And this can be a big drawback, I would say. The institute should provide it. If it is a government hospital, government college, or a private, they should have this. And they should be actually aware of these rules and regulation. The academicians, they should teach them. And the ethics committee, because here it is an academic study, the CDSCO is not in the picture. it is the key role who will determine the relatedness of the SAE and the compensation is to be paid or not. The ethics committee has a vital role to review and give its decision. With this, let's talk about the quantum of compensation, how this quantum of compensation is calculated. The formulas are already there. It is in the public domain. It is already given in NDCT. I'm not going to much detail, but the basic thing, which are the factors which are considered for this formula? The one is an age factor, which ranges from 16 to 65. Usually the inclusion is adult, and that's why I think this might have been taken. The second is a risk factor, which is also categorized from 0.5, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0.5, that means the patient is terminally ill, usually the cancer patients, when the survival is not more than 6 months. It's a highly high-risk patient. And 4 is an absolutely healthy, especially in bioequivalent studies. Okay, and there is no risk. And the base amount, that is 8 lakhs, which is usually included. Now, what are the compensation? What is the formula? The compensation formula, especially for the SAE, which results into death, that is a base amount multiplied by age, multiplied by risk, divided by 99.37. And I think our country, we should take pride of this, that we are the first one to come out with this formula, and people have, especially our own pharmacologists, they have really worked out, and it is done with some consideration. The range of this minimum amount which will be given ranges from 4 lakhs to 74 lakh. This is the minimum amount which we'll get. If I try to simplify this, if the age is more than 65, is a senior citizen, the risk factor is minimum because the person is absolutely healthy. You can see the compensation provided will be 32 lakhs. The same patient, 65 years, but very high risk, 0.5. The minimum amount which will be given will be 4 lakhs. In short, what I'm trying to convey is 65-year-old participant may receive more amount if the risk is less, but less amount if the risk is high. For other type of SAEs, where there is other than death or disability, and this is the most common, I think, formula which is used, because most of these SAEs, the patients are hospitalized, undergo some kind of an investigation or an observation. So when they are hospitalized, there is a loss of daily wages, obviously. And he was hospitalized, obviously, because of the SAE. So the compensation formula for them is 2 multiplied by W multiplied by N, where W is the daily minimum wages of an unskilled worker. Now, this is again very important when the patient is enrolled in the trial. At the time of ICD, you also need to capture this information, that what is the job, what type of work he's doing, and what is on an average salary he's getting. At the end, when something goes wrong, you cannot get back to for this information. And this becomes again a responsibility of the investigator, and he usually delegates the responsibility, and that should be captured. N is the number of days for which the participant was hospitalized. Now, what happens if the compensation is not paid? If the sponsor fails to provide, at the end, sponsor says, I will not give. If the sponsors fail to provide the medical management or financial compensation, obviously the consequences are the central licensing authority can give a show cause notice, can suspend the trial, can restrict the sponsor to conduct any further clinical trials and any other action which is the CDSCO they feel necessary. And I was just trying to, explore CDSCO website, that whether this regulation has really made an impact in India. Yes, it does. And this is someone has asked in RTI, and this information is available in public domain. You can see these are the details of the number of SAEs which has happened from 2011 to 20 in India, and the number, especially the pink one, these are the number of SAEs, the green and the blue one, which is almost same, the SAE compensation has been paid. And this is the financial compensation paid from, again, last 10 years, the details are available. On an average, the compensation which the patients or the nominee received was somewhere around 8,43,000. So this really, we can say that this regulation has really made an impact, and this has really increased our confidence in clinical trial. Not only our confidence as a stakeholder, but also our participants, the society. Yes. So hence, to summarize, safety reporting in clinical research is essentially scientific, ethical, regulatory requirement. As per ICH GCP guidelines and Indian GCP guidelines, there are regulations for SAE reporting, timelines, data elements, medical management, and financial compensation by both CDSCO, the regulatory trials, as well as academic studies. The sponsor has to provide free medical management, financial compensation if the injury is research related, and failure to provide financial compensation can result into various consequences as deemed necessary by the Central Licensing Authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a wonderful presentation in a short time. I do not think you have left any doubts to the audience, because the calculation is quite clear, crystal clear. Ma'am, I think the only point which I think is still a gray area is academic clinical trial. Most of the institutions, like you mentioned, are not willing to take the role of sponsors, and ethics committee are left in the lurch. The patients are left in the lurch. At the most, free medical treatment is given. But if disability or death occurs, then compensation, I've never heard of compensation being given out by medical colleges or hospitals.
True.
That is a gray area where I think most of the budding pharmacologists should work on to improve that area. Otherwise, functioning of the ethics committee becomes a big problem. In one way or the other, most of us are members of the ethics committee, and it is very difficult to function in the ethics committee because of this problem. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank
Any
you.
questions? We can take a few questions, Dr. Ganesh.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Madam, 2 to 3 questions are there in the chat box. First
Yes.
question is, for causality assessment of SAE, which scale is recommended by NDCT Rule 2019?
NDCT has not recommended, but we usually use WHO UMC, which is standard and it is internationally accepted. You can use WHO UMC, no problem.
Okay. The second question is, what are the reporting timelines in case of serious adverse events in biomedical research?
Biomedical research, same. We have to follow the same time frame, same data element. Only thing, you have to report it to your ethics committee. The CDSCO is not in the picture.
It is same as that of 24 hours as well as 14 days.
Yeah. To the ethics committee and the head of the institute.
Yes.
Next question is, what is the provision for pre-medical management in case of SAE, as many sponsors deny it, saying that it is not related to clinical trial drug? So can you throw some light on this?
See, the sponsor is supposed to, as I mentioned, they are supposed to provide the medical management as well as the compensation. And you have to have an undertaking before you review, approve a protocol. If this is a problem even nowadays with the post-marketing studies, because the companies, they want to, market the product. They want to use that promotion that our product is better than this, but they don't want to provide the financial compensation. They don't want to provide the study drug. And that is why the ethics committee has a very important role. You do not approve it. This is not allowed.
No, madam, the question is, if it is approved and if there is SAE, and in that case, sometimes it may happen that sponsors say that it is not related, hence we are not ready to give the free medical management. So in that case, what is the role of ethics committee?
Means the SAE is not related, or SAE is related and they are refusing.
According to principal investigator, it may not be related. So in that case, should the free medical management be given to the patient or not?
It should be given. It should be given. And as of today, I am in clinical research for last 2005 onwards. Most of the sponsor, they provide medical management. Medical management means, suppose many times it happens, the patient is supposed, let's say in Ahmedabad. Okay, the trial is in Ahmedabad, but patient is in some periphery area. Something happens and he gets hospitalized in that peripheral area. He doesn't come to Ahmedabad. Okay, so whatever amount he has spent, the medical bill, invoices, the companies, you have to submit it, and the ethics committee can literally ask the sponsor to reimburse that medical bill. And they
Correct.
usually do it. Yes, they usually do it.
Correct, madam. Now the last question. What are the regulatory requirements for reporting adverse event, not the AC?
The all adverse event, when we talk about adverse event and not SAE, all adverse event, they should be reported as clinical updates, as progress report, and final report. And it becomes the to ethics committee. They are
Ethics
supposed
committee.
to report to ethics committee. And the ethics committee is supposed to review and follow up whether the reporting is happening or not. If there are suppose initial reporting has happened and okay, no follow up, then the ethics committee can literally write a letter to the investigator, what is happening with this patient, please find out.
So is there any guidelines for timelines to report this AE?
No timelines. No
Yes.
timelines. Yes.
So thank you, madam. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we are towards the end of our session. Now I request Dr. Kamal sir to speak few words on this occasion. Over to Kamal sir.
Thank you, Dr. sir. And through this message, I just wanted to convey my sincere gratitude to all the participants to make this event a mega hit. And our resource persons have done extremely well, their job done extremely well. And Dr. Ganesh Dhakle, congratulations again from my side. It is a record-breaking incident probably in the entire history of such a large gathering, more than 1,500 participants and lot many logged in. We are working tirelessly behind the scene to make this workshop successful. And I just wanted to convey to all the participants that all the certificates will be emailed, e-copy of course, to be emailed on their respective email ID by 20th April. So I would like again to request to all the participants, because it is a gradual process, maybe 100 certificate be released in a day. So they need to bear some patience. And all the certificates will be issued. You need not worry. And thank you from the National Association of Pharmacology and Therapeutics for making this a mega event. Thank you all.
So lastly, I am very thankful to both the speakers, Dr. Savita Verma madam, as well as Dr. Meera Desai madam, for their excellent presentation, as well as our moderators, Dr. Shinoy sir and Dr. Balkrishnan sir, for their nice moderation. I am also thankful to Dr. Nitya Gokte madam to act as chairperson for this workshop. Lastly, my sincere thanks to all participants for their active participation throughout the workshop. My special thanks goes to Dr. Kamal sir, who was instrumental for success of this workshop, and sir has put their wholeheartedly support for this workshop and played a very active role and shown deep involvement since the inception of this workshop. So please give a big round of applause for the Kamal sir. Once again, thank you all to make this online workshop grand success and memorable one. With this, I declare that this workshop of 4 session is over. Once again, thank you to all. We can
Again,
have
just I would like to convey a small message that we are releasing the website on 2nd of the coming month, and we will inform it separately. The NAPTICON 2024 that is being organized by All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Nagpur, in association with National Association of Pharmacology and Therapeutics. And just last words, thank you, Avon Logics and Mary Software, for providing the background support for making successful and taking care each and everything. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.